Welcome to the postcast behind the paywall. I don't know what episode it is, but I
Nine.
do know episode 9. And we're live right now on our YouTube channel as well. We got a lot to talk about. I should have gotten a caffeinated drink. I do have my turntable coffee shirt on, so shout out. They're not a sponsor, but if they would like to be, we are taking sponsorships as of now.
I will
But yes,
I will also accept sponsorships from Milo Sweet Tea and Inglewood Baptist Church.
wow. Okay. So there you go. Or we could get paid and don't have any money. Like I'll just take a cold brew and they have the best granola bars at Turntable.
I thought you were going to say at
They're so
Inglewood.
good. No, I don't know what you could get from Inglewood. Maybe like a couple weeks off from tithing, like just in exchange that way. That's how you sponsor it.
A bunch of members already getting that already.
Okay. Well, there you go. This issue of the Jackson Post, which I don't have with me right now, but I've got the PDF file pulled up online.
We got to get your delivery fixed. So
I know.
Fortunately, you've got connections. I'm going to get that fixed. Hopefully, I've got connections to get that fixed.
I need I love the tangible paper. I love it in my hands. But there's a lot to cover, and I kind of want a format of kind of a celebration story and then like a serious story. And so we're just going to kind of alternate. And the first thing I want to lead off with is CJC inmates, so Criminal Justice Center inmates getting OSHA certified. So that's a big deal. I think I did an article or an op-ed back in the Jackson Sun days when Sheriff Mayer was asking for money every year over and over and over and over again. And I wrote something that probably didn't put him in the best light, but throughout that column that I was writing, I was also digging back into some other, comments that were made by Mayor Harris at the time about the recidivism rate in the county jail. And it was so high. And he was like, we've got to figure out how to fix this. And this was like 10 years ago, maybe even when he was saying that. And so I know there's been a lot of emphasis on, okay, we know we have inmates. Obviously, one job of a jail is to protect the community from people who are dangerous or breaking the law. One job of the jail is that could be punishment as well. But then there's also a third layer to this is what happens when these inmates get out. Nobody's there serving a life sentence, to my knowledge. So at some point, they're going to re-enter society and they need to be prepared to, live a life that they can support themselves with, productive, and financially productive so that they're not tempted to maybe, make some poor decisions again. So these are really important, programs that are within the Criminal Justice Center. So I'm going to let you talk about specifically the OSHA certification because I'm assuming you were there for this.
Yes, I was.
When this happened. And then if there's any other programs that you know of that are also happening in the Criminal Justice Center, we can talk about those a little bit.
Mm-hmm. All right, so, well, first off, I want to mention this August will be 8 years since I moved from sports to news coverage. And one of the first stories that I covered 8 years ago after making that transition was as they were starting, it wasn't, the jail hadn't been approved by the county commission yet, but everybody was like, it's going to be approved because they got to do it. So the sheriff at the time, John Mayer, was already kind of making plans for this jail expansion and what to do inside of it and stuff like that as they were discussing what all to add to the complex and the building and stuff. There was they got a grant in 2017 for rehabilitation treatment there in the CJC, not having to send them to Aspel or Jacoa or wherever to get rehabilitation. And in the space that they're using for that, it's not just for rehabilitation for substance abuse. It's almost like a class type area. And so they can use it for different reasons. I think 2 years ago, I went there to cover the graduation of their first class after Sheriff Weiser was elected and started implementing different programs. Pastor Ronald Benton of Mount Moriah Baptist Church, he's the chaplain for the CJC, maybe for the whole sheriff's department, but definitely at least for the CJC. And he's kind of the coordinator of a lot of these. And the first couple that we went to, there was like it was a faith-based type program. Well, now they're getting into business type programs where, if a guy has been in and out of jail ever since he was 15, 16 years old, he's 25 now, and he's starting to see, hey, getting into jail is not good. I'm getting tired of this lifestyle, but I don't know how to get out of it. Well, they provide this program for nonviolent offenders they have to meet a certain set of criteria, and they weren't clear about what. I think I think the number that Sheriff Weiser gave us last week was, on that day that we were in there, I think there were 756 um, inmates in the jail that day, but only 23 went through it. I'm not sure what separates the 23 from the other 733, other than some of them are violent offenders that aren't eligible for the program. But these 23 went through a 10-day boot camp where 10 days, a couple of people from the University of Tennessee Public Service Institute come in and do like a full day, like longer than 8 hours. I'm thinking it's like 10 hours a day of classes for 10 days straight, including the weekends, because it is a true boot camp where they are just bombarded with all this information about OSHA certification and all the info that you need to be OSHA certified. But they receive that certification that you can get from that close to 100 hours of training, so that when they are able to step out of that jail back into the real world, the outside world, whatever you want to call it, they've got this OSHA certification that they can take to Toyota or Black and Decker or Kellogg's, or they even said some of their people who have gone through this program before are now working at Blue Oval City. So they're able to take this and get these jobs that pay $20, $25, $30 an hour. And if you're working 40 hours a week, making $30 an hour, one, you've got time and money that you don't need to be out, you know, breaking into cars or whatever it is they did to get into the jail. But two, if you do have a $30 an hour job, you've got a lot to live for and to work for that you don't want to lose, that you would lose if you got arrested again. So this is definitely, I mean, I don't know what kind of success rate it's had with the different people who's come through the programs before, how many of those are never coming back again, but this is definitely something that has a lot of potential to keep guys out of jail if they so choose to continue down that journey of life.
And for people who don't know, OSHA is essentially like the baseline that you have to have an OSHA certification to work in any type of like industrial facility around here, to my knowledge. I mean, that's like sort of the baseline thing. You've got to be OSHA certified. And then there are obviously other certifications depending on what type of industry you go into that you may need, welding, whatever else. But OSHA across the board, you've got to have that, right?
Yeah, one faulty part of the reporting was I didn't put in the story what OSHA stands for, and I apologize. Is it Operating Safe Something Agency or something like that?
Yeah, something. I know that's a big emphasis for career and technical education, CTE programs in high schools. When I was in
Yeah.
Haywood County, OSHA certification was huge. We have it at JCM where I am now. Because what it does is, just like for the inmates, it positions them when they get out of jail. Obviously, they don't have a job waiting on them. I would assume most most don't. They have this in their back pocket now, as soon as they're leaving, and they can go to, hey, I'm OSHA certified already. And because if they don't have that certification and they walk out, like, they would have to enroll in TCAT. That's paperwork that costs money, possibly, or at the very least, if it's paid for by the state, you've got to fill out all these forms. I mean, that's a hassle. And maybe some people take that for granted, but that's not as simple as it sounds,
No.
especially for somebody starting with, completely trying to start over. So, hey, hats off to the Sheriff's Department, the CJC, for putting these programs in. And I would like to see like kind of what the success rate is, or if they're going to add programs to things like this, because I think regardless of anybody's opinion on how many people are jailed or who's jailed and the rates of all that, like, everybody wants, not redemption, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but everybody wants to see people kind of get their lives together and be productive citizens. The second chance, yeah. Or third, even third or fourth, whatever it is. Like, we all want to see people kind of get their stuff together and then come to the community and be a productive citizen in that community.
Yeah, definitely. And this is a great, or at least from what I saw last week, appears to be a great start for 23 individuals there.
For sure. All right, next story, kind of tucked on the right side of the front page. There is a judge appointment because I think about a month ago was it Hugh Harvey that retired. And so that created an opening for general sessions. And there are 5 nominees or applicants, I'm
Applicant.
not even sure, applicants for this position. So can you rattle off those names from memory, Brandon?
Can, and I'll even try to
All
do
right.
it in alphabetical order.
Oh,
Tom Corley, who is currently the chief of police for the city of Jackson. Jen Free, who is a lawyer on staff at Bird and Bird law offices. But do Bill Milam, who is the grandson of Harold Johnson. Howard Johnson's a hotel. Harold Johnson is a longtime official or longtime lawyer, also a longtime SEC official, who had a practice in downtown Jackson for like 400 years. He has
Howard
since,
Johnson is also a former third baseman of the New York Mets.
yes,
Continue.
because I got those confused because the Mets would be on TV and Howard Johnson would have commercials. And
You're
12-year-old
like,
Brandon is like, so he's got a hotel and he plays baseball? But, anyways, yeah, but Mr. Johnson in Jackson, Harold Johnson, I actually met him one time. Dan Morris, the longtime sports editor at the Sun, a few months after I got here was when Philip Fulmer was fired by the University of Tennessee. He said, call Harold Johnson. He's the guy to talk to about all things UT and SEC football. So, and he was kind enough to give me an interview and talk to me. He knew Philip Fulmer, had plenty to say about what the athletic department would do. Seemed like a really good guy. And but his grandson is the youngest person who's applied for the judge job to replace Hugh Harvey, who is still serving as judge. His last day is May 31st.
okay.
So the county commission will appoint the next judge, who will serve for about a year and then run for re-election next year during the county elections. But okay, so Bill Milam, and then the 4th was Buddy Patey. I mean, not Buddy, Mark Patey.
Patey.
Mark is Buddy's son. Buddy was also a longtime official and former city commissioner before the city of Jackson went to the mayor and city council form of government. And he passed on a few years ago. But Mark's on there. And then a gentleman that I'm not as familiar with, Robert Pope, who is a former Marine, did a couple of tours in Afghanistan and Iraq in the late 2000s, maybe the early teens. And then about 10 years ago, got out of the service. Over the course of years, got his law degree, has been practicing for about a year with West Tennessee Legal Services and Reeves Law Firm. And he said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring for this judge job.
Why not?
Yeah.
What do you have to lose?
Yeah. And the story in the paper is about 4 of the 5. Mr. Pope was not able to go to the Republican caucus meeting of the county commission last Monday night, but the other 4 did. And they all kind of made their case before 15 Republican commissioners. I wasn't there at the meeting because I had DCS training to go through so I could keep being a foster parent. But our good buddy Chuck Walker recorded the meeting for me, and I was able to listen to it. And
shout out, Chuck.
Yeah, shout out to Chuck. Walker Talks,
Walker Talks.
1015, talking West Tennessee. And so I was able to listen to the meeting, and the 4 that were there made really good cases for themselves. And after each one, I was like, man, if I'm a commissioner, I'm going to vote for that one. No, I'll vote for that one.
All right. So this is where I really want to kind of get into the weeds of this. So, but before we do, for anybody listening, they're like, well, what is the general sessions judge even like? What kind of cases do they even hear? So, real quick rundown of what are some things that would come to general sessions court that a judge would have to rule on.
I know that they do speeding tickets in Madison County, not in Jackson, because Judge Anderson takes care of those. I mean, small, like misdemeanor type stuff. I mean, a lot of like misdemeanor investigation type stuff, like, and family court goes to the chancery. So divorces and adoptions and all that stuff go to Steve Maroney, and I guess Kyle Atkins and Don Allen get the heavier stuff.
Okay, so this is just like traffic violations, like you said. Oh no, not traffic violations.
Yeah, traffic violations in the county.
In the county.
Yes.
Okay. So they were all at the Republican caucus, and then for anybody else that's listening, they're like, "Well, why would they go to the Republican caucus?" So the appointment is being voted upon or voted upon tomorrow in the county commission.
Yeah,
correct?
actually, yeah. If you're not listening to this live, probably by the time you hear you listen to this, the county commission meeting will have happened Monday morning at 8:30. But you can get a preview before you read about what happened by listening to this now. But yeah, they went before the Republican caucus. Go ahead with your question. Sorry.
So here's the thing, right? We know the county commission was like the first like partisan governing body. City council's technically not partisan, even though in the last few years every local election now can be partisan. But
There's
before
not a
that,
primary, but it's partisan. It's
but it's
partisan.
partisan. Yes. But it wasn't always that. Like this is just as fairly new.
Yeah.
A fairly new thing with school boards and city council. But county commissions always had the R's and the D's,
Mm-hmm.
always, as long as I can remember at least. And so the Republicans, because we're in West Tennessee, they obviously outnumber the Democrats. And so then you have this even smaller group of Republicans that caucus. And the point, and I've attended a few of these, the points of these caucus is for all the Republicans to get on the same page, even though they are elected representatives of districts, right?
Right.
Within the county.
Mm-hmm.
So they should be beholden to what their constituents want. However, because they want a unified front, usually when they caucus, they come to an agreement on who they're going to vote for as a party. Now, again, we want to limit the opinions on this because this is about news, but that's sort of the way this has worked in the past, correct?
For the most part, it has. There have been times where there has been a caucus and there was seemingly an agreement among the caucus members at the caucus meeting. And then the following Monday, they get to the county commission and then some of them break off and do their own thing. The most notable case of this was in 2020 when they were replacing Morris Merriweather on the school board. And the lady's name that wound up replacing him on the school board has totally slipped my mind.
No, you're talking about slipped my mind too.
Carter Estes.
Carol
Carter
Estes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It was when she was appointed. They had, I think, 4 or 5 people who had applied for the position appeared before the caucus the week before. And this was the March meeting of 2020. And I think COVID had not gotten to Tennessee yet. So there was still a caucus meeting like normal. And then I remember that commission meeting.
I feel like there would have been a caucus meeting like normal in July, honestly, during COVID with that caucus.
No, they actually did it virtually because they didn't want to. I mean, Gary Deaton was against all things protocol for COVID. But for the most part, they said, let's not stir up that hornet's nest unnecessarily. But anyways, I don't know why I went on that tangent. But some of the, before they voted, Claudel Brown, who's a Democrat, stood up and said, now we've always had a gentleman's agreement among the commissioners that when there's an appointment like this on school board, that whatever commissioners are heavily in the district that is covered by that district that we're appointing makes a suggestion out of the group, we typically go with that person. And so,
Makes sense.
yeah. And I'm thinking Mr. Brown is one of the commissioners whose district overlapped with because it's District 6 of the school board. The position is now held by, I think, Darnell. It's either Darnell or Andrea Moore. No, she replaced Hampton, so it'd be Andre Darnell's spot. But he said, and I think Carol Carter Estes is the person that we need to vote in. Well, some of the Republican people said, well, we essentially did that last year for
Scott Gatlin, probably.
No, Gatlin was after this. Maybe the one who replaced Shannon Stewart.
Okay, I don't remember who that would have been.
Yeah, no, Shannon Stewart was after this too. Whoever it was. So they did that. So they said, well, then we need to do that with this one too. Well, the rest of the caucus didn't care for that because they had another candidate in mind that they liked, but that person only got like 9 votes, whereas Carol Carter Estes got like 15 or something. There's 25 members of the commission. And even if there's only like 22 there and 3 are out, somebody still needs to get 13 votes to be appointed, so that they have a majority of the full commission. And Miss Estes is the one who got that. But there were a lot of angry Republican caucus members that day, and it looks like we could be headed toward that again this week.
And I want to talk about that.
And
but before we get into that,
like 4 things of this story. My bad.
That's okay. I do have a question. Let's say because not every Republican county commissioner shows up at the caucus. So without breaking sunshine laws, I guess, how do they get word to the other members of the party that this is who we're going to vote for? Or is that not breaking a sunshine?
It's not breaking sunshine law because they let the public know about it.
No, I don't mean the caucus itself. I guess that's what you're saying. They like the caucus is an open meeting. I guess what I'm saying is if they decide, hey, we want to vote in Joe Smith as whatever, and there's only 9 Republicans at the caucus, how do they get word to the other 8
So,
that are on the commission or 6, whatever it is, to vote that way?
well, I guess, first off, let's go ahead and address this one. Sunshine law gets broken about as much as something that gets broken a lot.
Okay, good. That's a good analogy.
I couldn't think of something that gets broken a lot, but the sunshine laws around here get broken about as often as Donald Trump tweets and angers the liberals with his Twitter.
Let me tell you something. When he went after Bruce Springsteen, he's done a lot of crazy stuff. He's done a lot of crazy stuff since January. But dadgummit, talking about Bruce Springsteen? No. Continue. I'm sorry. I had to continue.
When we get done, before we get off the phone, remind me to tell you something about right before we came out,
Okay.
or before I came out here for this. But sunshine laws. There's a lot of disregard for that among our local elected officials. Let's just go ahead and call that for what it is. It is what it is. Obviously, those laws have as much teeth as a 90-year-old man who ate a lot of sugar growing up.
That's a good one. That was
Thank
a
you.
good one. Yes.
But I think in this case they can get around it with if you and I are both Republican county commissioners and you're at the caucus and I'm not, I can text you and call you and say, hey, what happened at the caucus? And you can say, oh, well, all 8 of the 9 voted for this person. And I'll be like, okay, cool. Thanks for the heads up. Or I can read it in the Jackson Post and see who everybody voted for, and then I'm not violating anything.
That being said, in the Jackson Post, was there a vote taken in the caucus, and who did they choose to go with?
Yeah, and they actually handled it the way that the commission will actually handle voting this week. So essentially, you have 5 candidates, and to be voted on, somebody has to nominate you, and there has to be a second. I may be wrong about there has to be a second, but at least you have to be nominated before you can be voted on. Only 3 got voted on or got nominated, and that was Corley, Patey, and Free. And well, they may have already said, well, we'll vote for all 5 first and see what happens, but the other 2 didn't get any votes. They got 0.
Well, I already know who's not going to win out of these 3, but go ahead.
Female.
Yeah. Yes.
But so they vote, and Corley and Patey get the 2 most votes. So, and the way they do it is when there's 3 people getting votes, whoever gets the fewest votes, last place drops out. And then they vote again over however many there are now. When it was down to 2, there were 15 commissioners present. Corley got 5 votes, Patey got 10. So, and I guess they were going for 13 votes or a full 15 votes to get solidarity among the caucus. So they went ahead and said, we'll vote again just on Patey. Yay or nay, are we going to vote on Patey? And so Corley was eliminated, and Patey got 15 out of 15 votes on that one.
Wow.
With that vote being all 15 commissioners who were present, which there was only 1 Republican commissioner who was not there, Carly Bond, and she sent, listening to the recording, she told fellow Republican Commissioner Tony Niehoff who she would vote for had she been there, although her vote didn't count, but it was not for Patey. She would have supported Jen Free. So, but anyways, all 15 who were there wound up voting for Patey. So they walked out of there thinking Patey's going to get 15 votes from the Republicans Monday morning.
Because it sounds like it's already decided. So it sounds like we could just break this right now. Like, hey, it's going to be Mark Patey. And I hate that process. I think that's just the reality of the situation, though. That's just sort of where we are. So just to review this, right? Essentially, everything that comes before the caucus, may end up playing out. Except there were some exceptions. You mentioned the school board situation in 2020. Now, I know we mentioned Chuck earlier. I know Commissioner Deaton was on with Chuck or something, and he may have somebody else in mind.
Yeah, he's been loud and proud a supporter of Corley for a couple of months now. Harvey made it known at least 2 months before he officially turned in his resignation or retirement notification that he was getting ready to retire. So there's been people kind of getting involved in the conversation. Mark Patey has been at the last 2 county commission meetings, and there wasn't even a retirement yet until last month.
I noticed he led off with saying that he was a lifelong Republican. I don't know that any other candidate said that. I just saw his quote. That's what he led with.
Yeah, nobody else really talked about their political affiliation. Uh, I,
Yeah,
I mean, I
because it
know
really shouldn't matter in this. Like, it should just be based on like who is the best candidate for this position.
I actually had a member of the caucus tell me that last week that politics shouldn't matter when it comes to justice.
We
But
don't live in that world right now. That's for
nope.
sure.
But yeah, Deaton is a supporter of Corley, and there are between 3 and 5 who have been pretty loud about supporting Corley during this. And I've had one Democrat tell me that he planned on voting for Corley, and that one is a pretty prominent member of the Democrat caucus who probably has some influence over his colleagues in the caucus. So I could see some of the Democrats. And I actually brought that up to Commissioner Deaton one day, and we were talking offline about it. And I feel like I've got the freedom to say this since he went on radio last week and talked about it. But I asked him, I said, "You're going to vote with, like, if you hold to this vote, you're going to be voting with Democrats. How does that make you feel?" He's
I
like,
think it's
his answer was, "Brandon, they may be wrong most of the time, but every now and then they'll get one right."
it's like throwing holy water on a vampire, telling Deaton that he's like voting with Democrats. Like the world's going to implode.
Yeah,
Something's going to happen.
but
Tom
yeah,
Corley's
apparently
a great man. I think like I do feel like obviously there are some candidates with their experience that sort of stand out and separate themselves from other ones. You know, as long as the selection is being made in good faith based on who the true best person is for that job outside of political affiliation, like you can't argue with that. The problem is the appearance of it doesn't seem that maybe is the case.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely that's definitely an opinion that holds some water. There's some logic there, but it's a Republican caucus in a partisan legislative body that's allowed. You're not a big fan of the two-party political system. I'm not a big fan of the two-party political system. But in the both caucuses' defense, those caucus meetings are usually some of the more interesting meetings to go to. So I'm here for it.
For the drama.
Yeah.
Real quick, to put a bow on this one, this is normally an elected position, right? But since he's stepping down, so when is the elect? Do you know when the election for this comes next?
Yeah, so he was reelected in 22, so he had 6 years left on his um, administration thing. Whoever gets this um, Monday will be up for reelection next year because that's how it goes. They don't have it for the rest of the term; they have it until the next election. And Tony Niehoff, your favorite commissioner, asked all four who were present, "Do you plan to run for reelection next year if you get this appointment?" They all said yes.
It's a good question, Tony. So that's
And
actually a good question.
and so here's actually why that's a good thing at this juncture. You've got about a year because the primaries will be for the local elections will be the first Tuesday or Thursday in May next year. So whoever gets this is going to have 11 months to figure out the job real quick, kind of get into the groove of it and see if what you're doing is working. If it's not working, you've got, I think, about 40,000 people who are registered to vote who can decide what you're doing is not working. We want somebody else in there, assuming somebody runs against you. I think it's been 1 or 2 elections since Harvey had any real opposition. But I would imagine with the current situation as it is right now, and kind of how that position has been a little more profile over the last couple of years for reasons not every one of our readers wants us to get into on this podcast, I imagine. We don't want to get too much into scandal, smut, and sports.
Scandals. S
But
cubed.
But I'll be shocked if there is not at least primary opposition plus primary and general opposition next year for this position.
All right, tomorrow should be interesting. I think Patey will get it just because, but man, it would be something if Deaton breaks and then the Democrats and the Independents have some type of coalition that gets Corley in there. Are you going tomorrow morning?
I'll probably sleep in.
Shut up.
You kidding? As soon as we get done with this, I'm putting my bingo board together, man.
Oh my god. Okay.
But
I might take a personal day tomorrow and go.
there you go. I mean, it's the end of school. You ain't doing anything anyways.
Buddy, I wish. We got yours for summer school. That's a whole other.
But I will say, like I said, there's between 3 and 5 commissioners who've been pretty staunch and vocal about their support for Corley. One of those told me off record, so I'm not going to say which one it was, told me that they feel like that it's probably best just to stick with the caucus, because that person said, me voting at the caucus and that final vote was me giving my word, I'm going to vote for Patey. So, and that person said, I've never gone back on my word as commissioner, and I don't think this is the time for me to do that now.
That's right. Party over people. Way to go. Okay, next. All right. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this next one, just because Old Country Store 60-year anniversary. Congratulations, that's awesome. You're almost eligible for Social Security at this point. So, what is still under the average age of people that go there by probably 15 years?
Hey, I bring it down, so hush.
I go there too sometimes. I do. Real quick though, give me one memory that you have of the Old Country Store. And it can't be when you didn't wear your mask at COVID or took pictures of people at COVID and got in a bunch of trouble. One memory that has nothing to do with your professional job.
My favorite memory. Oh, let me give you this one. It was another one from right after I had shifted over from sports to news. There was a author who had just released a book, and he was there signing. This is in October of 17. And he was like a state political person who had, like, his father was a state political person who was in one party, then he served and he was in another party. So he was talking about, oh, we were different parties, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm not going to say the name of the person because I'm not going to give them that legitimacy by saying their name here. I'll tell you after we're done recording. But let's just say he's prominent for traffic networks. And he's acting as the media liaison for this person, trying to handle all the interviews and stuff. And so I walk in, and Kenny Cummings walks in, who's now the social media and media person for Mayor Conger. But at the time, he was still a photographer at the Sun. We walk in, and this person says, "Oh, let's say his name is Gabe. Gabe, this is Brandon Shields. He used the word legend. He's a legend in sports reporting around here because everybody, what he says, we know it's the truth. He's a great reporter. He just shifted over to news, and you're one of his first stories. Looking forward to it." And I was like, well, I appreciate that, sir. Like, we both knew who each other was, but this was the first time we'd officially met. And he said, and of course, this is 2017, so Clark Shaw is still alive at this point. And about a year before, both Clark and I were both ordained as deacons at Inglewood. We were part of the same deacon ordination class. He said, Clark tells me that you're a deacon at Inglewood. I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, well, I'm a member at Inglewood too, and I greet every Sunday morning, and just this past Sunday, I escorted you and your family to your seats. I said, really? He said, yeah, yes, sir. I never forget a face. It was you and your lovely wife, and don't you have a couple of kids? I was like, well, at the time we had 4. I said, we actually have 4. He said, well, I guess it's all 4 of your kids. I escorted all 6 of y'all to your seats. I said, okay, cool. Was this at the North Campus in Medina? He said, no, it was right here in Jackson, right here in good old Jackson, Tennessee. I said, that's interesting because I live in Medina, and for about a year and a half now, we've had the North Campus in Medina, and I hadn't stepped foot in the Jackson campus on a Sunday morning in a year and a half. So I don't know who that was, but he must have been good looking.
No, Peter Griffin. What and his family. Did he ever just admit, like, no, that wasn't me? Or he just, boy, he was politicking, wasn't he? Did you have to take a picture and hold up like that, like in the pose?
And wearing a ball hat.
Yeah. Did you see that?
Yeah.
So that of all of your time at Old Country Store, that is your memory.
That's my funniest story. That's my funniest story.
It's pretty funny. It's pretty it tracks.
Every time that there's an election and all these Republican candidates come in here, you remember in 2000, this was 2018, nearly a year later, the day before the state primary, Governor Lee would be elected that November, but he and 3 other Republican primary candidates came in that day, and we were preparing just to stay there all day, waiting on all of them to come through. And the reconstruction of the exit there had just been completed. And a couple of months before this, Jimmy Eldridge had announced that he would not be running for re-election for state rep, and he was running for mayor of Jackson. And he said, I was in the state house when all the funding for that got approved. I said, well, I'd hope so since you've been there for 20 years. He said, Brandon, let me tell you, he said, I'm so proud of what we were able to get done there because I worked hard and I fought hard for the funding for that. And now look at it. It's beautiful out there and it works well. And it's so much easier to get here because getting into Old Country Store was pretty difficult before that happened. Or it was more getting out because you couldn't just turn left to go to the interstate. You had to turn right and do
Got to
a
go
illegal
right, go to
U-turn.
Hollywood.
Yeah. And he says, so I'm proud of getting that done. I said, yeah, and we got like nearly a full year until the mayor's election. So I imagine I'm going to have to hear that story about 7 more times, aren't I? He said, yeah, probably.
I don't remember much, and maybe I just wasn't paying it that much attention back then. I just don't remember much from him with that race. I thought he had it in the bag, and I think probably a lot of people did. But then I remember like Conger's campaign, man, like they did so much through social media. Like they did a really good job with that. And we did our Jackson home, Anthony Kirk and I did a like get out the vote kind of rally at Baker Brothers. We did a whole thing. And Scott showed up. I forgot who's the other guy. He was another Republican that was running, Johnstone.
Yeah, Mark Johnstone.
Mark showed up. I don't know that Jimmy showed up. Like, I think he might have been the only one that didn't. And I like it. He's a great guy. Like, you know, we were friends on social media or whatever and whatever. But I just think he was more absent during that campaign than I expected him to be. I just don't remember a lot from him.
It wasn't that he was absent. It was that he gave himself a full 15 months to run for mayor.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think maybe it was they started early. And it was like toward the last, and when I say toward the end, I mean like the last 3 or 4 months when you think that they ramp it up a lot. I think there was some thought, okay, you've really been out there a lot. Maybe you don't want to oversaturate the market. So maybe you want to pull back a little bit in your appearances and maybe they will miss you and they want to see you at City Hall and they'll come out and vote for you. Like I've actually heard that theory.
Who was his campaign manager? Lord have mercy.
I think he had some state people running it that didn't have a lot of experience in running. They had a lot of success at the state level that didn't have a ton of experience at the local level.
My memory of Old Country Store is waiting in line at 5 a.m. for Christmas Eve breakfast when I was like in high school. Like that's a tradition there, right? Everybody goes. And I think we did it one year. I was miserable. I probably acted like a jerk because I didn't want to be there and my family made me go. And
what? You act like a jerk? Who would have thought that?
Yeah, I know, right? I'm usually very easy to get along with, but I don't know. I do like their ice cream parlor.
I have not done the Christmas Eve thing yet with them.
Man, it's fine. I think it would be a cool tradition. It was just, man, like just waiting in that line and then you get in there and you eat this huge breakfast and like you get out and it's still like 8 o'clock in the morning and you're like, you want to go back to bed. I don't know. It's a lot. All right, Old Country Store, congratulations, 60 years, way to go. Okay. More county budget stuff or more county commissionist drama, whatever it is. Budget committee met. There were raises handed out, but Mayor Massey has been holding out for a raise for his vice mayor. I forgot what all her titles are. I'm going to call her vice mayor. Terica Smith. Is that her name? Deputy mayor. Terica Smith, and he wanted a raise for her since she essentially got this position, and he hasn't gotten it. That being said, she came in at a much higher salary than her predecessor, I believe. So that's probably, I'm guessing, why they didn't give her that raise initially. But he's been fighting for it and pushing and pushing and pushing. And I guess this sort of came to a head this week because I think initially they weren't going to give her this raise. And I'll let you explain this in a lot more detail. And then they ended up giving a 5% across the board raise to everyone, including her, but that still didn't make up for the 2% that Mayor Massey originally wanted.
Right.
So he kept pushing for that. And where did we all end up?
Well, and yeah, the final update for this story is not in the print edition that you have there. I actually put that update up on jacksonpost.news on Sunday afternoon, and you can go read what happened Friday morning there. But yeah, 2 years ago, after Massey was elected mayor in 22, they essentially fired the HR director that he inherited in December of 22. February 1st of 23, Terica Smith joins. She had been an assistant attorney on staff with Jody Pickens's office at the district attorney's office. And Mayor Massey had known her for years, has a lot of trust with her. They went to high school together at Jackson Central Mary. They were part of the same Leadership Jackson class way back when. And so he just trusts her a lot, and he talked her into moving from the state office building there next to the Civic Center behind Burger King and moving up into on the main street, third floor, right across the hall from him, to her to be his deputy mayor. But what she really is the HR director. And one of the things that has been a point of contention is that the position of deputy mayor is not an actual official position in county government according to TCA codes. Jimmy Harris started this deputy mayor thing with his HR director, Tony White, because apparently Tony was really good at his job. And so Mayor Harris had a lot of trust in him. So he said, "Hey, Tony, would you mind taking on the smidget of responsibility of essentially filling in for me at events that I can't be at and speaking?" He said, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." And so he did that, and then still continued serving in his daytime role or day-to-day role of HR director. He left at the end of 2020, I think, or early 21, and went back into the private sector. And they hired the person that served between Mr. White and Miss Smith. She was there for about a year and a half before she was given her walking papers. She now works for one of the bigger employers here in Jackson. She's not out in the cold anywhere like that. But so Terica came in, or Miss Smith came in on February 1st of 23. Well, later that year, about this time of year, they're doing the budget. And they said, we're going to give everybody in the county a 2% raise. And when they say we're going to give everybody a 2% raise, that's essentially telling each department head, we're adding 2% to your payroll line in your budget. You can dish that money out however you see fit. Now, the most fair way is to give everybody a 2% raise, but if one employee is really, really awesome and another employee is not, they have the discrepancy to be able to disperse that appropriately. Ms. Smith did not get that raise in HR. And the reason that they said she didn't is because she had hired so late in the year that they didn't feel like she deserved it. Also added to that is her predecessor made in the mid 80s for annual salary. I've heard 84, I've heard 87, so somewhere in that range. Mayor Massey hired her in at somewhere around 100,000. Last year, her official salary line item was 103,000 even, but he took 12,000 out of his own budget and created a deputy mayor line in his budget and put that to her as well to give her $115,360 for the 2024-25 fiscal year. And so the budget committee was planning on recommending a 3% pay increase for every county employee. That was last year and this year. Last year, Massey said Ms. Smith needs 5% to make up for the 2% she didn't get last year. They said no. He came back again, asked for the same thing. They originally said no. Last Monday, Gary Deaton, when Massey is walking to the conference table to essentially have this conversation again, Deaton says, "Before we get started, just know you're going to walk out of here a happy man." And Massey said, "Okay, well, I hope that's the case." They told him no, but they said, stick around. And so, and I don't know if he was planning on leaving, but he stuck around. And Sheriff Weiser is the next one that they called up. And he had asked for 5% raise for all the jailers in an earlier meeting. I think Deaton was the main one who said this, and he's not the chair of the committee. He's just vocal about certain things. He said, well, Sheriff, I think not just the jailers, but also the patrolmen deserve 5%. Do you think that? And of course, Sheriff Weiser is not going to turn that down. So he said, yeah, if y'all can swing it, yeah, I would appreciate that very much. Well, before the sheriff says anything, Deaton says, "Sheriff, we know you want 5% for your jailers and deputies, right?" He said, "Yes, sir, I do." And so Deaton looks at the rest of the committee. He says, "I make a motion to give a 5% raise to every county employee that's not an elected official." And that got approved unanimously. To which I'm sitting there like, I just sat here in my chair and watched y'all go back and forth with Mayor Massey for 35 flipping minutes. All for y'all to do that?
This to me reminded me a little bit, and it's not the same, but it reminded me a little bit of 2 summers ago when Dr. King was asking for a certain amount of money for laptops.
Mm-hmm.
And the county commission
1.2
was
million.
like, "We'll give you that money, but it's not going to be for that. It's going to be for like SROs." And listen, county commission, they fund it. I guess they can do whatever they want, but it seems like sometimes they do these things in a way to just remind everybody that we're the ones who control all the purse strings. And you may get what you want, but we're going to make sure that you get what you want in the way we want you to get what you want. I'm not against 5% raises for anybody. I think patrolmen deserve that. Jailers sure as hell deserve that. Like a lot of the workers deserve that. But it
Highway
almost
department, maintenance. I mean, they all
all
deserve it. Yeah.
they all deserve it. But it almost seems like it's like you'll get your raise for your deputy mayor in the way that we want to give the raise to the deputy mayor. And I'm not saying that's why he did that. It just if I was Mayor Massey, that's how it would seem to me.
Oh, and that's how it seemed to me as an unbiased observer sitting there in the room watching this whole thing happen. And I'll go ahead and tell you here for the millions of people watching. Shut up. That I mean, within 3 minutes after they did that, I sent Massey sitting on the other side of the room. I sent him a text. I'm like, if they knew they were going to do that, why did they have 35-minute conversation with you? And I also asked, are you going to agree to it? Because read the story from the Monday meeting where I get into the weeds of the whole thing. That part of it also required his agreement for all this to work. And essentially, he just addressed my question. He didn't really address the whole 35 minutes just to do that part. And he was non-committal about if he was going to agree to it, because when he was asking for 5%, he was asking for 2% more than what everybody else was getting, which meant if everybody's getting 5, what does he want
She's
from
going to
Miss
get
Smith? He
7.
wanted 7. And apparently that statement had made its way to members of the budget committee. They had another meeting on Friday. She was called back, and when they sat down, the information was up on the board. This is how it's going to look. This is how everything's going to be affected. The difference between 5% pay and 7% pay for Miss Smith. I think Carl Alexander told me it's about $2,700. That number may be off by a little bit. If it is, somebody who cares enough to actually check the budget at this point, congratulations to you for being that vigilant. My apologies.
Nerd.
But he said, are we really straining at $2,700 for a budget as big as our county's budget is? Which, by the way, last year's budget was like $305 million or something like that. Half of it being your school system, by the way. Well, the school system budget is 150. Y'all don't fund the whole thing. I think y'all fund like 48 million of it. Anyways, or the county commission funds
County
48
does,
million
yeah.
of it. Yeah. But Chairman Alexander, to his credit, said, yeah, 2 years ago we didn't give it, but looking back on it 2 years later, maybe we did do her dirty. And he said we didn't intend to do her dirty, but maybe we did. And so this erases that for the most part. And I also missed this meeting too because of sick kids. But from what I understand, when I talked to Chairman Alexander about it, the mayor shook hands with everybody who voted for it. He won 4-2 in the vote, and he shook everybody's hands, even the ones who dissented, if they stuck around in the room long enough after the meeting was over to be thanked. And he said, gentlemen, we may disagree about things in the future, but this is the last time you will hear from me on this.
Look, I see both sides of it, and you wrote a really good op-ed about it too. Like I can see, I understand why Massey wanted to push for this. Like that's like she's an important part of his team, and she hadn't gotten a raise yet, and so I get it. I also get the side of the budget committee where like, hey, she came in so high. Like I understand it. I think the parts that I don't understand and I don't like necessarily is the way that it seems like they're playing bully ball with purse strings to prove points. Like just because you're in a position of power doesn't mean you have to act a certain way. So I'm glad they got it done. And good for AJ for like pushing. But again, I can really see both sides of it on the level of just strictly finances, right? Like I don't know all the games being played, all that stuff, but just strictly in terms of finances, I literally can see both sides of this.
Yeah, and that's how I tried to look at it when I wrote the opinion piece, and obviously just reporting on it. I mean, I've been watching this happen for 2 years. Tuesday was the first time I'd written the first word on it, on the issue, because I felt uncomfortable writing about one person's pay rate and being as specific as I got with how much Miss Smith gets paid. But she's a public employee. All public employees' pay is public record. So, she had to know that was a possibility. But I also felt like it was worth having the people know, hey, this is going on. This is what the mayor says. This is the mayor's logic. This is the committee's logic. And I'll be Fox News, and I'll just report, and I'll let y'all decide how you feel about that. And if there's a side to be taken, I'll let y'all take those sides, and then we can play Red
Well,
Rover later.
yeah, but if you're Fox News, then you're not really. I'm just kidding. NPR, PBS,
There we go.
but they're not going to be around for much longer. So
Right, yeah.
okay, I don't know. I feel like this is the value of local media, like these stories right here. Like this is so deep into the weeds, but it's literally taxpayer money that we're talking about. Like everybody needs to be informed about this kind of things and the process of it all.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
I mean,
I find it very interesting.
and that story from Monday, we get in the weeds on that one. Like, I went back and read, and I was like, do I really want to get this deep into it? But I was like, but where do I stop? All right, let's go all the way.
Go.
We'll find out where we are when we get out on the other side. So
That's good. Those are the best kinds of stories.
yeah.
Real quick, we are like I'm gonna kick this into high gear now. JMCSS board wants revisions on the charter school application, which I think we touched. This happened like a couple weeks ago, I believe.
Yeah, and because the people who lay out my paper, I'm not really sure where they are. I know they're somewhere between Venus and Mars in the solar system. I can't really narrow it down further than that. I'm looking at the previous week's paper. I'm like, holy cow, my school board story didn't get in. So we ran out of space, so I put it in this week's print. So that's why that's there.
I was surprised, just given, because there was all this talk about the new board and how, things are going to change. And it honestly just seemed like business as usual when it comes to charter schools applying. But I know there were some concerns about I think the budget that was presented for that school.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you told me, maybe it was off, or maybe it was on a previous recording, that was sort of the main hang up for a lot of people. But I do know Glenn Goff voted for it. I'm at this point, I hope that we have open minds to charter schools. I've sort of turned, as long as it's the right one, I've sort of changed my thinking on charters recently because I just feel like there are different things we've got to do in public education to better suit our students.
Yeah. Well, Gabe, you may remember when we had the Shields Report radio show and leading up to the primaries for school board elections last year, we had everybody on at some point, right?
Mm-hmm. Everybody, except for there's one person I don't think. No, I think we did have everybody. Yeah,
I think we had everybody, but I think you missed one show where somebody came on, and but we had everybody on, and every Republican they toed the line of I am for school choice, and Glenn Goff's vote in favor of JMS Jackson Museum School. I asked him about it the day after. He said, yeah, I campaign on school choice. I'm an advocate for school choice. I'm not sure if he still runs it, but a couple of years ago, I was running columns and doing interviews with him about a nonprofit he was running that raised funds to give kids scholarships to schools or to help them pay for any fees that they incurred to go somewhere that they're not zoned for, so that they did have that choice. So he's an advocate for school choice. That vote was him following through on what he campaigned on. Mm-hmm. Whether you disagree or agree with that, you got to at least respect that. So respect for commissioner board member Goff for that. Everybody else voted against it. Harvey Walden had a lot of questions, and I quoted him from the previous meeting that there were concerns with the budget. Shane Barnes had a lot of questions about transportation. But here's the difference between this board and the previous board of 2 years ago when American Classical Education first came in. And I'd like to think it's based more on American Classical Education, the difference between ACE and JMS, and not the difference. Probably a little bit of the difference between the current board and the previous board, but I think it's more about the difference between ACE and JMS. The pleasantries between JMS and the school board this time around is a whole lot nicer and a whole lot more civil than the conversations between ACE and the previous board. Part of that has to do with the fact that It looks like JMS actually used spell check when they were looking over their
Well, that's what I was going to
application.
say. Like, I don't think it's as much of a reflection on the board or on either board, and more so on the charter school who's applying. Like Ace, half-assed it, like on their stuff. Like they didn't even get our town right on the application twice. So,
And twice they said they talked to one, they got the name of Keep My Hood Good wrong.
right.
Secondly, they said they talked to Juanita Jones, who is the director of it. And to this day, Juanita Jones says she still has not heard from anybody from Ace.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, I hammered them pretty hard about a year ago with a column on that. So, no need to open that can of worms again.
Yeah, and I totally understand if there were budget issues. Like I completely understand not approving it for that reason, because that's obviously going to affect things. I do like whatever I've read about JMS, like Jackson Museum School. I like what they're trying to do academically. I do like that. So maybe if they can get their budget stuff, I know they get to reapply, right? They have 90 days to reapply.
Right.
So, maybe they'll get their budget stuff straight and move it on through.
I think it also helps that the director of it, Dr. Little, she lives in Dresden, but about 10 years ago, she was working in JMCSS. So there's a little more familiarity there, even if they've never met her before. At least there's a little bit of familiarity there, more so than some random guy coming from Cleveland or Los Angeles or wherever the guy lived that week to try to bring this charter school into Madison County.
Yeah, that whole thing was a little shady. Okay, so some good news. Tonian and former USJ Bruin and I believe former Ole Miss Rebel? Where did he? Yeah, Ole Miss Rebel. Ryan Rollison made his major league debut in Arlington, Texas this past week when he pitched for the Colorado Rockies. When they faced the Texas Rangers, and you have a whole write-up, a whole story there. In last week's post, you talked to did you talk to his dad and him, or just his dad?
Just his dad while they were sitting in the airport waiting to fly from Denver to Dallas, because that's kind of the nature when your son comes in as a relief pitcher. You're like, okay, he's on the team now. We need to fly and go watch him play. Oh, shoot, he didn't play tonight. Okay, hopefully he'll play tomorrow. And he was called up. He got the call up on Saturday, and he pitched an inning in Albuquerque on Saturday night, then came out after one inning when he's typically going to pitch 2 or 3 innings. And he thought he had done badly, and he didn't. So he's kind of sitting over there like, why am I not in the game anymore? Why am I sitting in the dugout? And then the manager is like, oh, you hadn't heard? You got called up. You're in Denver tomorrow. And so Sunday was his first day on the Rockies roster for an actual regular season game. But the starter went, I think, 7 innings. So his services weren't needed that night. They lost on Monday in the first game at Texas, but the starter, I think, went 6 innings that night, but he did get in to pitch a third of an inning on Tuesday night, so he made his debut. And so, yeah, Ryan Rollison from little old Jackson, Tennessee, is pitching in the big leagues now, and he owes it all to his preschool teacher.
Yes, it's me. No, so it's funny, like my first job at teaching was at USJ. I was a kindergarten assistant. Well, my first job in education. I was a social worker before that, but I was a kindergarten assistant. So I was the only man in the building.
Lower school?
With the lower school, with the exception of our PE teacher, who was Joseph Talley at the time. He's a former pitcher at Union. And so we were the only 2 men. So the kids loved us. I mean, that's just the way that is. If you've ever been in school and you have 2 male teachers in an elementary school, it's like you're a rock star. And so Ryan was a student. I don't think he was in my class, but he was and I also worked with the after school care program the year before that when I was in grad school. So I think he went to that. So I knew when he was a kid, he would have no idea who I was. But I saw also another former student I taught, Spencer Nelson, who is assistant coach at USJ and coached Ryan when he was in high school. Spencer actually flew down to Dallas for Ryan's debut and got to see him pitch and got on the field. I actually saw Spencer at the gym today and kind of talked to him about it. But what a cool, the odds of getting to Major League Baseball or being a professional athlete, I forgot what they are. I'm sure they've changed since I heard this stat several years ago. It's around under 1%, right? Like people who, this just doesn't happen. And this is a huge deal. For as small as Jackson is, we've had quite a few people make it professionally, Ryan is the latest example. My classmate, class of 97, JCM, Ben Howard, was the
Uh,
first one that I remember. I can remember him debuting, I think, for San Diego, pitched
mhm.
in Pittsburgh. This was like 2002. And it was just so
Right.
surreal seeing him on TV. He's somebody from that I had literally played with on the same team, like playing. I'm sitting there creating myself on PlayStation, and he's like out there pitching, and I was just like, oh. But yeah, I mean, it's really it's cool for Jackson, and it's great for people who are still in the community to see people like Ryan and Ben play in the majors, like on television.
Think about this too. I'm trying to remember if they weren't in the same year, they were in back-to-back years. But I could be wrong. But I'm thinking Ryan Rollison, who's with the Colorado Rockies, and Trey Smith, who has won 2 Super Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they were part of the same senior class.
They might have been. They might have been. They're around the same age.
Yeah, I mean, at the most, they're a year apart.
Yeah, I mean they were in the high school at the same time at one
Yeah.
point. Yeah, for sure.
I
Yeah,
think Ryan may have been a year older because I think Ryan's senior year was 2016, and then Trey's senior football season was that fall.
hmm
So yeah, Ryan may be a year old.
yeah. It's and even USJ is not a big school, so even having two professional athletes come out of a school that it's a private school, it's just not doesn't have the same amount of
It doesn't have
student
the numbers,
population.
but
Doesn't have the numbers.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
so
it's got whatever you want to say that the facilities and the training and the coaches and all that stuff. It's got that, but a school of I don't know, probably 350 in the high school.
maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
it's got 2 guys currently playing in no 3 because shoot, who's the kid playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Ryan Miller.
Yeah, Ryan Miller.
So
He was just a couple of years after those 2.
funny story about that. My daughter's boyfriend, he's family friends with the Millers, and we were all going up to Philadelphia Labor Day weekend this past September.
Yeah.
Me and Jordan and her boyfriend, and we're sitting there waiting to board in Nashville, and all of a sudden, my daughter's boyfriend's like, "Hey, that's Ryan Miller," and he's like, and he comes over and talks to us, and we ended up like, his brother was in a musical up in Philadelphia or something. It was a whole thing, but he was on the same flight. We happened to run into him. He had missed his early flight out of Tampa, and he was, and up to Philly. So yeah, 3 professional athletes out of that school, and all of them around the same age. They were probably all there at the same time.
Yeah, they were. It's possible that Miller's freshman year was Rollison's senior year,
That's right.
but
Ryan's a little bit young.
yeah, he's a little younger. He was. I think he said he was 2 years behind Trey. Which, if my math is right, I think that would be he was a freshman when Rollison was a senior. But 2015 and 16, you're walking the halls of USJ, and you're walking with 3 future professional athletes.
Who would have thought?
Well, we
Pretty
knew one of
amazing.
them with, right off the bat, and then the other 2 just kind of blossomed there real quick toward the end.
Although I will say, yeah, I feel like Ryan really broke out in college. Like I think he went to Furman. Like that's where he really
Mhm.
broke. When I was at JCM, we had 2, I guess, out of the time I was there. Al Wilson, obviously, and Artis Hicks. Artis was class 97 with me. Al was 95.
Ben
And
Howard
so
was
they both.
before you.
Ben, that's right, Ben. He was 97. No, he's my age. So we had 3 as well. Yeah, Artis, Ben, and Al.
Drew Sutton was North Side, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, he was Northside.
It's funny that we've had no basketball players.
Well, here's the thing about basketball, I think at least. Like to go pro in basketball, I don't know what the percentages are. First of all, the rosters are much smaller.
Right.
So you're gonna have a limited amount of space. Also, the physical attributes that it takes, like you just got to be. I don't know. I'm not gonna use like a freak of nature in a negative way, but you've at least got to be 6'4", 6'5", right? I mean, to play professionally for the most part. Like
Unless you're Muggsy Bogues, yeah.
Yeah, but there ain't no Muggsy Bogues in the NBA right now.
No.
But I'm just saying, like so I think there's like you whittled down the percentages even more when you talk about NBA because that's just a whole other like
AJ Merriweather, I guess, was the closest making it to the NBA. I mean, we've had a bunch go and play overseas, and we have a handful that are playing overseas now from Jackson. But as far as playing in America,
Todd Munt played. He played for the Hawks, and he was a JCM grad in '92.
Okay.
He does not like my writing, though. I can tell you that because he has told me.
Well, many people in this county don't.
I know. But yeah, no. Todd Munt might be our only NBA.
Okay.
Player. Whoo, buddy, we covered a lot of ground tonight. I like ending on a positive.
Minutes we better have.
I know. Well, it's good. It was good. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in this one, especially with the county commission stuff and the judge and all that. You're gonna have a fun meeting in about 9 hours,
Yep, something like that.
something like that. All right, buddy. Enjoy it. Thanks a lot. And we'll be back next week
All
with
right.
next week's news.
Thank you,
See
sir.
you
See
later.
y'all.